Welcome to Fire and Smoke. My name is Amin Sheikh and today I'm going to show you how we made this. Barky, succulent, fall off the bone, Dino beef rib. Is some ribs. These ribs are from a local craft butcher, Strachan Craft Butchers. These are going to be absolutely delicious. The marbling in them is absolutely insane, but let's get them out of the pack. Pat them nice and dry. So what I've got here is 4 absolutely delicious Dino ribs from a local craft butcher's. Going to be honest, there was a little bit of a miscommunication. I didn't expect them to be cut, but these things happen in barbecue. We're still going to go for it. We're still going to cook them. As you can see, the marbling through these are absolutely delicious. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller, but we'll control that with the heat. That's not a problem. Take the biggest one, cook it, put it to the hot spot, and obviously we'll domino down from there. Now, for rubs today, what we're going to do is keep it super simple. We're going to keep it for a house blend. We're going to go salt, pepper, no garlic this time, and just a little bit of mustard as a binder. What we want is we want the flavour of the ribs to be coming through, and we want them to do all the talking here. All we need to do is supply them with a way of cooking. So, let's get straight into that. First up, store-bought mustard. It's cheap enough, you can get it anywhere. Just a binder is really just to make sure we get a rub to stick really good. Cover it all. Now I'm going to use one hand for this, mainly because I don't want to get it absolutely everywhere, but again, that's fine. Now make sure to get your edges and your tops and your bottoms. And again, don't worry if this is a little bit messy, it's just to make sure that your seasoning and your rubs actually stick. There you have it, 4 ribs covered in mustard. Now time for the rub. So the rub, as I said, it is salt and pepper only. That's it. We're going to let the meat do the talking here. We do want a fairly heavy dose of this, so just make sure you get it all round, all the sides. Now a lot of people won't do the back. I prefer just to do the back because why not? We've got plenty of rub, we've got plenty of seasoning. There you have it. 4 beef ribs, completely seasoned. We're going to let the cheap barbecue get up to temperature. I'm going to walk you through how we're going to cook this, and once we're ready, we'll get the meat on. But quickly, let's take a look at the coal and let's take a look at the barbecue.
So what we're looking at is a really cheap supermarket barbecue. This probably cost about £120 from Asda, maybe about between 3 and 5 years ago. The metal is super thin. It's probably about 1 to maybe 1.25 millimeters thick. As you can see, the bottom grate is burnt through. I have added in some additional steel angle just to prevent the coals from getting to the bottom section. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. This is what you get for £120 at a supermarket. It's designed for grilling, not barbecuing or smoking, but we'll make it work. As you can see, the coal is now burnt right through the chimney, so let's get this in and let's get the barbecue set up to do a very long cook and something it's not meant to do, very long cooks.
It's never designed really for smoking, it's really just a griller, but as barbecue enthusiasts, we can make this work. So the reason we can make this work is it's got air inlets. You've got one here on your top left, which is closed. You've got one on your top right, which again is closed, so we'll open that just now. And then you've got one down here, which is underneath, if you can see that there. And again, that's just basically going to let everything in. So, in essence, what we're going to basically do is we're going to be cooking up here on the top left. Coals down here on the bottom right. The top right one will be completely closed, so effectively the heat goes from here, has to travel through the barbecue up and then back out that side. Now, with cooking on these types of barbecues, you're really going to have to cook the coal. The wood that you're going to add in is strictly for flavour. You can't run one of these really cheap barbecues that have got almost thin wall metal on complete wood, because otherwise you're just going to have a fire in there, your meat's going to be too close, everything's going to burn up, it's going to be a disaster. So you don't want that. So, get it in its lowest setting, get your coals nice and warm, but get them as far to the other side as you possibly can. I'll let you see in the front shutter just now. We've got a little bit of temperature gauge in here, which is basically something you can buy from Amazon. It's an oven temperature gauge. It just gives me an idea of what's going on with the ambient temperatures inside this pit, because the temperature is going to fluctuate massively throughout the cook. But if we can keep everything closed, we can keep everything slow, we can add in some charcoal as we need it, we can add in some wood splits just for the smoke and just for the flavour, it'll be perfectly fine. And so, let's have a wee look in the front. Explanation, first of all, those pieces of metal that are sitting inside the pit are there just to brace the bottom because I've completely burnt it through. I've abused this thing over the years to the point where it is definitely done. However, one last cook on this before the new Fire and Smoke custom pit arrives is probably a good idea. Your coal is on the right hand side. You want to pull it to the right as far as you can get it. The heat's going to transfer from this side. It's going to go up the pit. It's going to go out and it's going to go through that stack there. It's not a stack, it's an air invent, but we'll call it a stack for the sake of what it is. We're also going to add a water tray here so that it keeps everything just a little bit cooler. If we don't add the water tray, the heat inside the barbecue is going to get really warm really quickly and we're going to risk burning the ribs.
Now that the water pan's in, all we want to do is close the lid and get the barbecue up to temperature. Set your vents as follows: top right, completely closed, bottom right, about halfway open, top left, about halfway open, and that's going to give us enough air to continue burning without having to worry about getting too much air in there.
Now, no matter what guys, this barbecue here is a cheap supermarket barbecue. I have abused it, so it is in its last legs. So ultimately, as soon as I get a bit of wood in here, it's going to start pluming out smoke everywhere. But again, the wood in this barbecue is really just for flavour, it's not for heat. You're never going to be able to burn an open fire like you can in an offset smoker. What you're effectively doing here is you're doing direct heat barbecuing rather than offset smoking barbecuing. But again, you will still get some good results and it will still be amazing. It's still going to be flavourful. The pit itself is now up to temperature. So let's get them on, and as I said, what we're going to aim for is about the 225 to 250, and then at the end we're probably going to fire it to 300, and we're going to obviously finish these off. It's going to take us roughly between 6 and 8 hours depending on how the cook goes. So let's get the ribs on. Got our coals down here underneath the water pan. The water pan's starting to do its thing. Obviously all the ribs are up here. Fattest rib to the right hand side, going to the smallest rib to the left hand side. And that's pretty much it. As you can see in there, you've got the small oven cooker that I mentioned previously, and that currently right now is sitting just over the 225 mark, which is kind of where we want to be. We want to be between 225 and 250 to begin this cook. It's going to take a while, so let's get the pit lid shut. Let's get the barbecue going. Let's get a wee chunk of wood in there, and let's just get some smoke plowing out of this thing. First couple hours is where it's going to take on all of its flavour. You're only adding chunks here, you're not going to add too much. Now, what I've got available to add chunks is going to be oak whiskey barrels. I personally prefer oak because I feel like the smoke's the best. It's obviously going to burn the hottest, but again, in this circumstance, we're not burning it, we're just putting wood in. Now, you don't need massive bits of wood for this here. You only really need a small bit. Now, that'll go in there, and it's going to create some big flame. Want to keep it open? You want to make sure it's caught, but again, that's why we've obviously got that water pan there, because any of the heat that comes directly off that is going to hit the water pan. In fact, what we'll do, because I know it's going to go a bit further over here, is we'll protect that rib again, bring the water pan in, and then we'll be good to go. But it will smoke and it will go in fire. The only difference is it's not necessarily going to be a very clean open flame. It's going to potentially create a little bit of dirty smoke, but this is part of barbecuing on a cheap supermarket barbecue. And that's us. Literally within a few moments time it started to catch fire. That is pretty much as good as it's really going to get within this sort of barbecue situation, guys. It will burn, it will smoke, it's going to add flavour. I mean, you can already see the smoke basically coming up and hitting everything within the barbecue. It's going to be good, so let's get this shut up, get the lid down, get the first couple hours in, and then we'll check in with you once everything's getting going. A quick check on this one, and as you can see, smoke's doing its thing. It's white. As I said, it's going to be difficult not to have white smoke in here, guys, if you try to keep the temperature low. In actual fact, it's not even on fire anymore, so we're going to work on this a little bit more. Let's just get this vent, this back vent, fully open just now. And let's see if we can go any more. And we really don't want it smoking like that. We ideally want to try and get an open flame. So let's just keep things going and we'll see how we go. That's us. It's now back in fire. We've opened that vent. Let's just keep the vent open. As I said today, guys, temperatures have been a little bit weird. So let's just go for it. We'll keep that there. Ultimately, you're going to get a lot of draw of air in through this section here because it's a cheap barbecue with obviously the movable grate on it. So just shut it back up. And we'll just need to keep an eye on it. It started smoking again, so let's go in and get a quick look. Now, I feel that with these barbecues, when you're trying to heat up wood, which really doesn't want to burn because you're trying to close off as much oxygen as possible, you're going to have to keep opening it, getting the flame back going, shutting it down, opening it, getting the flame back going, because otherwise what you're going to have is that massive blue smoke that you just seen there just now, which nobody really wants. So keep an eye on it. Now this split's nice and thin, so obviously a little bit longer than you would normally imagine. Generally, if you're going to do it, you probably want to cut them in half. I personally though want to get as much smoke on these ribs within the first hour as I possibly can, because ultimately after that you're then rendering the fat down, and then ultimately you're just cooking them. So we're going to let this split burn. It's completely back on fire again now, but as I said, in order to do that I've had to let in more oxygen, so we'll just need to keep repeating the process, and you're going to need to keep an eye on it. Now, as we keep saying, these barbecues aren't really meant for smoking, so remember, we're literally cooking here, the fire's here, so there really isn't that much space, so we just need to try and protect the meat as much as we possibly can. So it's now back lit, it's now creating a lot of flame. Let's let it burn a little bit longer. It will eventually go back out, and we'll just repeat the same process again. It is a constant thing, guys. You're going to need to keep on top of these cheap barbecues. You can see pretty much as soon as I've shut that lid, it started smoking again, which means I can guarantee you there's almost pretty much no flame in there straight away. And I was correct. The flame is pretty much gone out straight away again, and it's lit as soon as you let more oxygen in. So I think this is going to be kind of how it's going to work today. We're going to go through the process of opening it, closing it, opening it, closing it, but I think for now what I'm going to do is it's fully on fire. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes, let it get really burning, and then I'm going to close it back down again, and then we'll just let it smoke from that point, because at that point we're then effectively turning the wood itself into charcoal, which is ultimately what's cooking the rest of the barbecue anyway. Again, these pits are very temperamental, so you're not really going to know until you try these things out. Now, if I'm recommending somebody who's got one of these barbecues, who's doing their first cook, I don't recommend you use ribs because they can be a lot more expensive. I'd stick on probably a half chicken, maybe even just start out with some chicken legs or some chicken drumsticks. Wings are always a good one. You can fill these pits full of wings, you can treat them exactly the same sort of situation, scenario, get a little bit of wood in there, you can then obviously get your water pan in there, fill the entire top rack with wings, and you're good to go. But again, I wanted to do this today, guys, just to show you a more complex cook. It can be done, and you're going to get amazing results, but you're going to have to keep on top of it. I'm going to just do this with the lid. It's never designed for this. I'm just going to let a little bit more oxygen in there. There's oxygen coming in here, there's oxygen coming in here. That flue is now fully open, this one, and again we've already started getting smoke. Ultimately the goal and the end of the game, what we're trying to do here, we're trying to get a lot of smoke on those ribs.
It's smoking again, so back in, get the lid open, get the fire back going. There you have it, we're now back on the fire. Let's repeat the process again.
So let's have a quick check in on the temperature just to see where we're going. So we've got some boiling water here. The flame itself is actually driving the temperatures quite far up, because right now we are kicking at 300, which is not where we want to be. So what's basically happened here is, guys, is that flame has spiked the water. It's now boiling that. It's boiling that water. So I'm going to shut it all down. I'm going to just cut out the direct flame. I'm going to keep it closed, and what we're going to do is we're just going to let the smoke run. We're going to let this completely smoke itself out for this piece of wood. We'll do that just now. As I said, it's going to take on a lot of flavour and a lot of colour. As you can see, we're starting to get some colour already on a lot of the ribs, but it's a little bit hot. It's not quite where we want to be, so leave it all open just now. Give it a minute or two if the pits get too hot. Again, super thin metal, so it's going to be so easy to get the temperatures back down. You don't really have any risk with these barbecues of burning things, other than the fact that if you go into the house, you take your eye off of it, it could be an issue. It's now pretty much going through. There's a little bit of flame left to come off of that, but ultimately we're really just going to get some smoke flavour, some char. The pit, as you can clearly see, it's just went from about 300, we'll zoom this in. It's went from about the 300 mark, which is directly in the middle. We've bounced back down to the 250. I'm going to let it come down even further. Then we're going to close the pit off, and then we're going to go for another round of the same thing. It's quite a lot of effort, but you will produce some great barbecue if you're willing to put the effort in. So now what we've got here is the pit on the left hand side, which is the cheap barbecue, which we've got the ribs in. That is basically burning itself. There's coal in there, there's heat in there, there's temperature in there. That first bit of wood that we added in has now pretty much burnt itself out. We're only about 35 minutes into the cook. it's added some smoke flavour. Just going to let things cook a little bit for maybe another 25-30 minutes, just at the current temperature it's at. We will add in another little bit of wood, but we want to keep the wood obviously to a minimum, because the wood itself here is really just adding the smoke flavour. Now, if you barbecue using lumpwood charcoal, you are effectively going to get the same flavour, you're just not going to get as in-depth a smoke flavour. So in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we're going to stick on another wood split, and we're just going to see how things go from there. So the ribs have been on now for about 2 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Let's have a wee check in, let's see how things are going. So again, up here, got a temperature gauge on the really cheap supermarket barbecue. We've obviously got everything closed, everything is good. The coal, let's have a quick look. We'll move this out of the way. The coal, it's nice and burning there. Now what we've got here, and again, this is why I really like restaurant grade charcoal. Look at the size of this bit of charcoal. So it's burning through, it's keeping things good. That one piece alone will probably keep this going at the 225 mark for at least 30 minutes, maybe even 40 minutes or so. So that with a little bit more charcoal around the sides just keeps everything going. Now this pit's actually quite big, as you can see, and all we've got is a tiny little fire and coal section that's burning here, because we don't want too much heat, but we do obviously want a continued heat. So let's have a look. And we're looking good actually. These are taking on a lot of colour, which is magnificent. Got a tiny little bit of crisping around the edges there, so what we'll probably do in this one is we'll flip them round before we close the pit back over. But you can see the heat, you can see the temperature. Currently rocking these at the 250 mark, which is pretty much ideal. We're bumping the temperatures up as the cook goes on. The meat itself is starting to pull back from the bone, which is exactly what we want, and this one at the edge actually starting to slide a little bit, but that's kind of the problem when you don't keep them on the rack. But again, butcher's mistake, they're still going to be absolutely delicious, there's nothing going to be different about them. But yeah, let me quickly get these turned. Now while doing these cooks, it is also extremely important to make sure your water pan is topped up with water. So as you can see here with the lines, we originally started up here, and now the water itself has gradually went all the way down. It's obviously boiling water, but what I'm going to add in is we're going to add in some normal water. When adding the water, what we're also going to do is add in another split of the wood, just to get a little bit more flavour in there, get a little bit more smoke in there, and then yeah, just keep things going along, and we'll check back in a little while. So what we've done here on the pit on the left is we've now added in our second wood split, and I want to just get, as I said, as much smoke flavour onto that as possible. Now, because we've already had the first one in there, it's already taken on some colour, there's already a little bit of char, and what we're going to do with this one is we're just going to let it go. We're just going to put it in there, we're going to keep it fully closed, we're going to let it smoke through all the way until that wood really does turn to charcoal, and that's pretty much going to be it for the smoke, guys. You can't impart that much smoke on these things inside the barbecue. Towards the end of the cook, maybe about the 4 hour mark, we'll throw in another one. Again, same situation as before. It's a little bit of a larger wood chunk. I'm not going to go down to go through the process of splitting that down, but if you guys want to, you definitely can. And we're just going to keep things very slow. We're going to keep the temperatures very low. Now, the second bit of wood is still burning itself through, but we're starting to run out of coal. So, getting a lumpwood charcoal, get some in there. Keep it lumpwood charcoal though, because if you don't, then you're going to get a lot of crap, you're going to get a lot of crap smoke, whereas lumpwood charcoal in essence is wood that's basically charcoal, and all we're doing is burning that down. So before it completely runs out your coal bed, then what you want to do is you want to get some fresh charcoal on there, and believe it or not, just this little amount here will probably keep us going now for about another hour and a half, almost even 2 hours. But yeah, again, all we need to do is keep going through the process, keep adding wood, keep adding charcoal, keep things going for however long we want to do it, and we'll start temperature probing things around about the 3-4 hour mark, but I know these are going to take between 6 and 8, so we'll get there. So if we're having another wee look in here, ribs looking amazing, looking delicious, looking barky, and got some absolutely outstanding colour on there. Now you can see a lot of red, guys. That is basically just the smoke imparting, and as you can see, those ribs are starting to pull right back from the bone, and pretty much when they all pull back from the bone, you know you're getting places. The water pan though is pretty much dry. This is really as far as you want to take it without having any water in your water pan. So let's just get that filled up straight away. Now, but we're also going to do at this point, because they have taken on a lot of colour, and we are starting to get quite crispy edges on the ribs. But the the actual fat itself hasn't rendered down yet, so we need to protect that. So all we're going to do is go in with a little spritz. Now this is just a bottle, it's a spray bottle. What I've got in there is apple cider vinegar and it's water. So 50% apple cider vinegar, 50% water, just to keep the moistness going. The water pan will still do its trick, but this is just to keep on the meat itself. Super easy and simple. Get in, give it a good spray. And this is what you're left with. Water boiling again, ribs are looking absolutely amazing, and we're just going to keep continuing the process. We are now around the 3.5 to 4 hour mark, so this is the third split of wood we're actually going to add in there. And again, same process as before. We're going to let it fully ignite, we're going to close it down, we're going to let it smoke away. Seen from the earlier footage, the ribs are taking on absolutely amazing amounts of colour. They're taking on amazing amounts of flavour. They have taken on quite a large amount of smoke, as you can see. Look how dark they are, look how good they're getting. The meat's starting to pull back from the bone, but again, remember, there is no membrane on these. We're smoking, we've got some flame. The water pan's doing its job. Temperature wise, we are rocking right around about the 260-ish mark right now. So we're 4 hours in, and what I'm going to do from this point is I'm going to slowly kind of just bump the temperatures up every hour or so till the 8 hour mark, and we're going to get it. We're probably going to finish these off about 300, but there is still some steps that's going to happen between now and then. So around about the 6 hour mark, we're going to pull them off. We're going to wrap them just to basically retain any more moisture, any fats, any juices. We'll wrap them in tin foil. I personally feel that what that does, although the bark's quite aggressive on the outside, this will allow things to soften themselves back up, especially with direct heat cooking. It's not quite the same as offset cooking because there is a lot of heat specifically coming from that flame. I mean, as I keep saying, there is not much distance from the heat to the actual meat, so we need to just do something to kind of bring that back in, moisten things back up a bit, but you'll see all those steps later on. So now we are roughly about 6 hours and 15 minutes to 6.5 hours into the ribs cook. They've taken on a lot of colour, they've got really dark and brown. We're going to basically take that to the next stage. So the next thing up for the ribs is let's quickly check the temperature of them. We are probing round about the 165 to 170 mark, and we're going to pull them off because ultimately they're starting to dry out quite a bit. At this point in the cook, all we're going to basically do is wrap them. We're going to wrap them in some tin foil, keep them nice and tight. I'm also going to add some beef tallow to that. You don't have beef tallow if you don't want to. Personally, I feel adding a little bit of beef tallow just helps the process along, keeps things a little bit moist. Now again, what we've created on here is a really harsh bark, so it is quite crispy. It's going to be quite hard just now, but as soon as we put it in the tin foil, we're going to leave it on there for about another hour, hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, depending on what we're going to do. Probably looking to pull these off, to be honest with you, around about the 195, maybe the 200 mark, and then obviously we're going to let them rest, and as soon as they rest, everything's going to relax back down. All of that rendered fat's going to be amazing. The meat is going to be on there, it's going to be absolutely delicious. But let's take a quick look at what we've got, then we'll get them wrapped and bring it back. So here we are, about 6.5 rounds into the cook. What we're basically going to do is we're going to pull them off at this point. Now we take the tongs, we'll be able to hear. They're crispy and they're barky, and that's exactly how we want them. Now, they have taken on massive amounts of colour. The bone obviously has started to pull back a bunch of them. They've been on now for, as I'm saying, about the 6 hours to 6.5 hour mark. We're going to pull them off. We're going to get them wrapped in tin foil, then we're going to get them straight back on, keep the cooking process going for another couple of hours until they're absolutely tender. So there you go, 4 completely delicious dino ribs. Now as I'm saying, at this point they're super barky, they're super colourful, they are super juicy, but they're not quite ready, they're not quite temperature, they're not quite soft enough. So all we're going to do is wrap them in tin foil. We're going to use a little bit of beef tallow, which we have here, and this can be bought from any butchers. Effectively all this is rendered down beef. I don't do it myself, it saves a massive amount of time and it's just easy. So when I'm cooking, I'm trying to make things as easy as I can. Generally when I'm cooking, I've got a family who wants this stuff as soon as possible on the dinner plate to eat it. So that's it. Quickly wrap them in tin foil, bit of beef tallow, back on the barbecue, and we'll just keep going with it. So there you have it, 4 beef ribs. Now this tin foil isn't actually that great, so I'm going to rewrap these again and then we'll get them back in the pit, because I've got a split here, I've got a split down here at the where the bone is, another one where the bone is there. So we'll just quickly double wrap. 4 of them ready to go back in the pit, and what we're going to do is put them back on the exact same order they came off, left to right. So that's them back on, and they'll basically go on for another hour and a half to 2 hours. We're going to bump the temperature up. Up until this point we'll be cooking between the 225 and the 250 mark. Again, it's a cheap supermarket barbecue. You're definitely going to get swings in temperature, but you just need to fight it, guys. You've seen me fight it all day. This is part of making barbecue on something that's not really meant to be made, or not really meant for this type of barbecue, but we'll keep going.
This is what you should have. Water pan still boiling away, beef ribs are fully wrapped and they're back on. Time to get some coal in for this part of the cook. We are now 7.5 hours into the cook. We'll get another temperature check, and if they're ready, they're going to come off. All these are over 200, so let's get them off quickly.
So there we go. Each of these ribs probed at between the 203 and 207 mark, which means they're absolutely done. And as you can see, even the tin foil is taking on colour, because that's the process of direct heat cooking or smoking in one of these cheap garden barbecues. So now what we need to do is we need to let these rest. Now, if you're like me, and you have been like me, you want to get straight into these straight away. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I guarantee you, if you let it rest for at least an hour, the very minimum an hour, you'll be so much better. Me personally, I'm basically going to put these in a tray. The tray itself is going to get wrapped in tin foil. That's going to then get stuck in the oven, and it's going to basically sit in the oven for the next maybe 5, 6, 8 hours till we get around to actually eating these and getting them open. So that's pretty much it. 8 hours in, everything's wrapped. You can't really see it, but you will see it once we open them back up, once they're fully rested.
So let's get these away.
So it's now the next day. Thankfully here in Scotland we're for the nice dry evening, and it's been a nice dry day. The ribs are ready to go. They're at 160F internally. They should be tender, they should be perfect. Let's get them out.
That's it. So what you should be left with is 4 absolutely succulent, delicious, barky, crispy, juicy beef ribs.
So there you have it. Beef ribs done fire and smoke way on a cheap supermarket barbecue. It's not easy. It can be done. You need to be patient, but look at the results. It's absolutely delicious. It's barky, it's juicy, it's fatty, it's all rendered down. Absolutely everything's amazing. Just look at it. Bones. What bones? So you get your rib, look how delicious it is. Look how juicy it is, look at the fat's rendered down. That one's gone. This one doesn't even pick up. Look how good it is. But look how tender this is, guys. Just absolutely tender as you want. One full pulled beef rib right before your eyes. Let's try some of this. Damn. That is delicious. There you go. Pretty much it in a nutshell. But I know everybody doesn't necessarily want pulled beef ribs, but everybody wants a nice big bite of a beef rib. Oh, fell right off the bone. Good thing we caught that. So let's just grab it and let's just bite it. These are so tender. you're literally falling apart. This one is quite hard to get right at home. It's definitely worthwhile doing it if you've got the patience and you're willing to fight with the fire. That's it for this one. Smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, share it with your friends, and try it at home. You won't be disappointed.